How's it going, everybody? Today we are continuing work on my 81 Silverwing project. Since the last video, I knocked out these rear supports, which had previously sat right there. I kind of just cut them in half and hit them out. Easier said than done, truthfully. It kind of took, it took me some time. Additionally, I fixed up the hoop. It was pretty bad. You guys saw it, and it's a lot better now, as you can tell. I had to inlay some of this smaller diameter piping or tubing so that I had something a little thicker to weld to, because of course, like I said in the last video, I was burning through everything. But I got that these two ends, they come together, and I had cut it off, and I got that properly capped. It was kind of not done as well as it should have been done, and the hoop ended up just pulling off. I was giving it the stress test and I had to just redo the whole thing. So I did that, and I've also been making good progress on the battery box, cutting all this stuff up with the angle grinder and using the flux core welder to put a box together. So if you remember in the last video, I removed the center section of exhaust underneath, and now you can actually see my battery box down there. It's not set yet, where it's going to be. It's just held up in there just with friction currently. It's, a really tight squeeze. I had a little flange on the front side that I kind of poked out, and there are these two fins. Oh, sorry. There are these two fins, not sure if you can see it, maybe, that it sits in there anyways, and then the back is just kind of squeezed in. I'll have to weld this out the rest of the way. As you can see, there's a little air gap, but this was just the mock-up. The battery fits in there pretty well, although I'll have to find a way to get it in and out, because I don't want to just have that battery permanently welded in there. The box has to kind of tilt down for the battery to go in, and then it can kind of go back up where it needs to. So I'm not sure the best way to quickly do that, but we'll kind of have to keep thinking about it. Other things that I'm going to be working on are the electronics tray, which will go under the seat, and I'm thinking I'm going to cut it off about here so that I still have access to these bolts for my seat, and we'll have to figure out how I want to mount it on the rear, but that's where we're at for today. So this should be a fun video, guys. This is a crudely drawn diagram of the system I'm planning to go with for my pod filters. I want to step them out a little bit and add this washer. Like I said, the idea originally came from a video on Ichiban Moto, his channel. He's got about 150-some thousand subscribers, but a shout out to him. Despite him being 8,500 times my size, I still feel that it's important to give him credit where it's due. I got this idea from him, and he put out a really good video explaining how it works and also putting one together. So, like I said, the washer spins on that pivot point, and it can be fully restricted or fully open, anywhere between that, infinitely adjustable to restrict or allow airflow. And another nice piece is on my bike, there's frame that sits here, so you wouldn't be able to see the pod filters from the side profile of the bike without stepping them out. And part of the thing I like about cafe racers is the really raw look, and you can see everything, and it looks very simple, even if it's not. To emulate that traditional style in my application, a design like this for attaching the pod filters will actually be very, very useful. So we're going to pick up some materials and start working on this along with the electronics tray, like I had said originally, and we just want to make sure there's no clearance issues, nothing like that. But this is the design that we are going to go with for the pod filters attaching to the carbs. 2 trips total, one to the auto parts store to pick up exhaust piping, which is what we're going to use to step out the filter. I've already cut off my lengths that I need to make that work, and a trip to the hardware store to pick up some washers like this and the bolts and wing nuts that we're going to use to try to fashion this all together into one cohesive working piece. So we have the vision, but to get it to work, we'll see. What I did here in an attempt to save / reuse some of my parts, this was formerly what went to the old intake, and I chopped off these rubber couplers that are what connect to the carburetor, and I was able to slide in my pieces. Really good fit. Like, that's not going to come apart. And our pod filters will cap the end of this, and then we will put in our little butterfly valve to control air. So all said and done, 2 welds and our washers in place, and the application is really perfect, spot on what I was hoping it would be. This is one of the actual first small fabrication projects that has actually turned out you know, how I expected it to, or how I wanted it to. So in terms of envisioning or pulling the idea, whatever, to getting it ready to go on the bike, this is definitely one of the smoothest that we've had. So I'm really excited to see this thing in action. Here's the look of the pod filter setup. I've got them both on, not dialed for airflow yet, but as you can see, that's where they're gonna sit. And I'm actually really happy with the way that they look on the bike. So we are now working on mocking up our seat tray. I think this piece is actually gonna sit down inside of here. Let's try that again. It's gonna sit down inside of here, and then we're gonna have some walls on the side, but this will allow us to house everything. We're gonna keep the front open so that this harness can flow right in, and we're gonna see what we can do. So we're gonna keep getting this thing mocked up and see what progress we can make. Due to both a combination of my lack of welding ability, resources, time, energy, whatever, this is gonna be my tray in the final fashion, more or less. I welded this bracket here. It's mounted to my tray. In the rear, I got welds on both sides, as well as periodically around the back of the hoop. As you can see, we are probably going to put some sort of fabric skirt or something along the side here so that it's not totally exposed, but that's all the more I'm gonna do. I only need a place so that I can mount my electronics to something, and so that they can sit underneath the seat. So buttoned up, we'll see what it looks like, but this is the first iteration. If I need to build out a full box, I will, but as little effort as I can do to get this thing on the road, while still looking up to standards with what I'm hoping to achieve. So, you know, this is it for iteration 1. As you were probably able to see, this is our ground, and that will reach our battery box. But this is the wiring harness that plugs into the, wherever that piece was at, I don't know. Oh. This is where the starter is fused at, and this is the lead that we had previously. So that was not going to reach our battery box, unfortunately. So we're going to pull these ends and throw them on a longer piece of wire so that we can effectively lengthen our lead, so that we can get power from the battery with it in its new home underneath the bike. So back to the battery box now. I did find a way to, with it wedged up in there, weld this seam. It needs to be cleaned up, welded a little bit better. But the battery can now come in and out with a little help. And so that's going to be where our battery box is at. It's not currently sealed on the top, but I'm not so sure that it needs to be. There's just a little area where you can see in there. But overall, I think with the battery box and that orientation and everything, that's going to be our best bet to get this bike up and going as quickly as we can. So I'm about to start all the wiring here for this rear hoop. The LEDs that are going to go, we have turn signals right and left, brake light, and then just like a standard tail light that's always illuminated. And I've coordinated these 5 colors to the 5 things that I pulled off my bike. So the blue and orange are 2 turn signals. The green is a ground, I believe, universal ground. The green with the yellow stripe, that is the high for the tail light, so that's when the brake light's activated. And the brown here, I believe, is the low for the tail light. So we have low power and then high power for all of these, and a ground, of course. So we're going to start working on cutting these wires down to a length, stripping them, and getting them soldered to these wires here. And the hope is that we can still use these OE style plugs, pins, whatever, so that we can pull our hoop off if we need to. But once it's all in place, we shouldn't need to pull it, but you know, doing things like this makes it easier, and it's better than having to do the work while it's on the bike. So we're gonna go ahead and get this stuff soldered. So there's one connection, just so you can see how to do it. Get your joint hot first with your soldering iron, and then feed in your solder. Tin your wires ahead of time if you can, but fortunately the wires here on the light LED side were already tinned, so we didn't have to do much there. So I'm going to go ahead and repeat this process and heat shrink everything and show you guys the finished result. So here's a look now with everything mounted where it will be. As I mentioned in the last clip, this is the harness for my LEDs with all the quick connects where they need to be, and that does work as it should, given all the things that we have currently. We do need a new flasher relay that will allow our turn signals to work, but as you can tell now, illumination for our standard tail light and a brighter illumination for our brake light. But we will have to replace this flasher relay here with an electronic flasher relay. The rest of this is more or less mounted where it will end up. Heat sink, same thing with these. They're bolted down through the tray. Our starter relay, we have a power from our battery, as well as ground, of course. All these other harnesses just clip in, and you know, everything's mounted up aside from the rear LED at the moment. So once we get that flasher relay, I guess an alternative would be to use inline resistors to step down the power, but you know, a couple bucks for a flasher relay, electronic flasher relay, is going to be easier on me. But you know, like I said, the bike is moving along, and once we get the seat on, then we should be able to take it out for a spin, get those carbs dialed in, you know, figure out our airflow situation. But I'm gonna call it here for this video. Thanks for watching, and in the next one, hopefully we get this bike running and out on the road.